Welcome to Back in Crime, a podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers. I'm Stewart Fillmore, retired FBI agent.
And I'm Todd Hiles, retired Secret Service agent. In this podcast, we cover cases we worked and some we wish we had.
As lifelong street agents, we were where the rubber met the road.
While the big guys were doing press conferences, we were interviewing the criminals.
And because of that, we can take you inside these cases
and under the crime scene tape.
This is Back in Crime.
Stuart, today's episode is about two unsolved murders that happened in Houston, Texas.
You know I love unsolved murders.
And these are strange because, according to law enforcement, the investigation is still open because nobody was ever arrested for these crimes.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, unsolved murder, there's no statute of limitations on murder, so yeah, it's going to stay open.
But most people believe they know who committed these crimes.
Ah, okay.
So it's a crime that'll make you look twice at your neighbors.
Okay. Oh, I'm intrigued.
In fact, law enforcement has only named one suspect for both murders.
Law enforcement has only named one suspect. Okay.
For both murders.
Okay. So we've got a suspect.
Right. We have a suspect, but again, no one's been arrested. Case is still open.
Okay. This is kind of a little riddle you're giving me right at the start. Like, how does the guy hanging in the room, there's a puddle of water under him, but there's no chair. So how did he hang himself?
Stood on a block of ice. But to our listeners, please stay tuned for the ending of this episode because there is a sharp left turn coming, and it will take us straight into conspiracy country.
Love it. Love it.
Now, before I give away any spoilers, let's go under the crime scene tape and start from the beginning.
Let's do it.
On June 23rd, 1965, it's a Wednesday, and two Houston police officers are dispatched to a residence on a welfare check.
And a welfare check is sometimes you may have a relative that you talk to once a week and that may be elderly or whatever, and if they don't, you talk to them on Wednesday, you call them, they never answer, and maybe within a day or two you start really worrying. So the police will go by and do a welfare check to make sure that everything's okay.
And prior to becoming a Secret Service agent, I was a police officer, and I've been dispatched on these calls.
Sure.
And I'm telling you, when you get dispatched on these calls, you get this uneasy feeling because you do not know what to expect. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it turns out to be nothing, mm-hmm. but what you can find sometimes can be awful. Mm-hmm. Okay, so these two officers, they arrive at the location on Driscoll Street. They notice that the house looks a little worn, but nothing out of the ordinary.
No scenes of a struggle, a break-in, nothing like that.
Nothing like that. And again, it's just a small 1.5-story house, what many people probably would refer to as a quiet neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And again, how many times have we heard that before? It was just a quiet neighborhood, as if crime never happens there, but yet something terrible has happened in this neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, one thing that law enforcement will teach you is that people will say, "Oh, he would never do that in 100 years." Yes, he would.
Yes. So these two officers, they're dispatched there, and they're told that living at this residence is an elderly couple. Fred Rogers, who's 81 years old, and his wife, Edwina, who is 79.
Fred and Edwina, okay.
Right. And a nephew of Edwina has not heard from them in the past few days, mm-hmm. just like you said.
Yeah.
This relative has made numerous telephone calls to the residence without anybody answering. He's gone to the house, he's knocked on the door, and nobody's answered. And again, he thinks this is highly unusual, so he calls the Houston Police Department. Now, when the officers arrive there, the resident is secured. The doors are locked, no windows are broken or open. There's several newspapers on the front porch, and the mailbox is overflowing with mail. Mm-hmm. Again, I would say that this is the classic red flag that something's not right at this house. When the officers go around to the rear of the house, they notice some flower pots have been piled up against the back door.
Okay, now that's a little suspicious.
Very unusual.
Yeah.
Because these flower pots are actually blocking the back door from being opened.
In other words, being blocked so that someone on the inside is not going to be able to push the door out.
Right, but
Okay.
no one from the outside could actually come in because these are in the way.
Yeah, it's in the way. Yeah.
Right. And again, these officers, they feel that this is weird because nobody would stack flower pots against the door in this manner.
No, that's weird.
And again, just like you said, it's like they're trying to keep somebody from either entering the house or exiting the house. So the officers move the flower pots, and they make entry into the house through this back door.
Okay.
Once in the house, they shout out police, they identify themselves, and they're just waiting to hear this elderly couple, say, invite them in, yell out, we're here. But instead, they are just met with silence.
And this is going to make those police senses go up even more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The hair on your arms, that you're going to feel this one in your stomach, something's not right.
We've mentioned in other podcasts how in law enforcement, you develop a sense of, I don't want to call it ESP. It's not psychic.
It's
but
the
it
spidey
is,
sense.
It's a spidey sense. It's some kind of radar that tells you something's not right here.
And again, these guys have it because they walk into that residence, they search, all the rooms, they look around there, and they don't see the couple. And again, they were probably half expecting to see them, probably deceased, lying on the bed, but there was nobody in this house.
Yeah.
And the house is very neat, and it's kind of tidy inside, and nothing appears to be out of place.
Okay.
They determined that the couple are not home. Again, this nephew explains that there's no way that this couple would just leave their house, that they have to be there. Now, one of the officers...
Is there any indication there was a car there? They had a car. Was the car there or not?
I did not see any of that in the reporting.
Okay.
What that's there. I don't know if they've gone yet and canvassed the neighborhood and asked neighbors yet. They're just telling the relative, hey, they're not here at the house. One of the officers says that he did notice some food on the counter, and to him it looked like maybe somebody was trying to prepare a meal, but nothing appeared or stood out of the ordinary.
Okay.
But again,
no blood.
Not that they see at this time.
Yeah, nothing turned over.
Nope.
Yeah, just no signs
And
of a
again,
struggle.
the house is sort of neat and
almost
tidy
neat, yeah.
in their first glance through all
Right.
this.
Okay.
Now, again, like you said, the spidey sense something. Just one of these officers is going to be quoted as saying that something just did not feel right for him. There's just something in his gut that something in here is not right. So really, sort of now, I would call it like more of an afterthought. This officer opens the refrigerator, and he makes a comment that there's a lot of meat packed into the refrigerator. But when the officer opens the vegetable bin, he sees the human heads.
Wow.
And the two bodies in the refrigerator.
Now, that's a very technical thing, and in law enforcement, we would call that a clue.
Yeah, when you saw the heads, yes. And the two bodies that are in the refrigerator are going to be the elderly couple.
Yeah.
Their blood has been drained from their bodies, and they've been cut up into pieces.
Brutal.
Investigators are going to come into the scene, and they're going to conclude that the previous Sunday, which was Father's Day, that Edwina had been shot execution style, and Fred had been beaten by a hammer.
Okay, so the bodies were cut up. But there must have been sufficient. They were able to put the bodies back together enough to develop the sense of how they had died.
Well, I think they're
really
probably
to do
looking
an
at the
autopsy.
head. They're probably looking at the head, the skulls.
Oh, okay, just based on the skulls. Okay,
And
okay.
Fred was beaten by a hammer, and his wife had been shot execution
Okay,
style.
got it.
And again, they think that it was the Sunday before, and again, that fits the time frame of the nephew's story, saying that when he last spoke with his aunt. And after they're killed, these investigators believe that their bodies were drained of the blood, chopped up, and stuffed into the refrigerator. They believe that this is not a quick crime of passion, but more calculating and surgical. I guess it would be something you'd see like in a horror movie, not on this quiet neighborhood street in Houston.
I'm just playing this out in my head as so you have the Edwina who's been shot, and then Fred has been beaten with maybe possibly a hammer or some type of blunt instrument. So I'm trying to think, in terms of sequence, was she shot first? Maybe he's reacting. There's maybe a struggle for the gun. That's why that Fred wasn't shot.
Right.
But somehow he's able to wield maybe the gun itself as a blunt instrument, and that but wasn't able to get a shot off. So just an interesting thing based on what we know so far.
And really, we talk about this neighborhood canvas now that they start talking to the neighbors. Now, some neighbors are going to report that the couple live at that house by themselves. However, there's one neighbor that says that this couple has a son, and his name is Charles Rogers, and he lives at the house.
Okay. Yeah, and this is, we're talking 1965. Sadly, I think, we don't know our neighbors as well as maybe you would have back in those days. So I'm sure there was probably one or two neighbors that were maybe, well familiar with them, or maybe not. You could have had people that like to stay to themselves even back in those days, but it was more typical that you knew your neighbors better.
Right. And so you're exactly right, because it's weird that some neighbors, they don't even think that they have a child. But then another neighbor says, no, there was one there, but never saw him. However, the nephew will confirm that Charles is their son and that he lives at the residence.
Okay. But you would think that would be some of the information that maybe the nephew would have provided initially is, it's my aunt and uncle, but they have a son that also lives there.
And again, to this day, Charles has never been found.
Charles being the son.
The son. His whereabouts are unknown.
Okay. So earlier we mentioned that there is a suspect, so maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I think I'm starting to think that maybe Charles might be that suspect.
Right. and so to this day, he's never been located, and he's never been questioned regarding the death of his parents. I mean, he just vanished into thin air.
How about, is there any reporting about any of his belongings, the things that he owned, his possessions? Were they intact at the house as well? As if maybe he had just vanished completely. Didn't take a bag, didn't pack a toothbrush, all that.
I don't know if they ever determined that. Now, he does. We'll get into it because they will find some of his stuff at the house.
But I mean, if I'm as we talk about these things, Todd, and sometimes some of the cases we go over, for me, this is I'm surprised I've never heard of this case. This is a new one for me. I love these kind of cases, and I'm surprised this one has never hit my radar. So one of the things we like to do in our format is, as we go through these things, is we kind of like try to get it in the mind of how would I investigate it? Would I have done this differently or whatever? But that's what I'm thinking initially going through. We obviously know Fred and Edwina, they're victims here of murder. And we have an unaccounted for son. So I'm just telling you what I would be thinking of if I'm at the scene is, where is his room? I want to see, what do I have on a lead to find out where he is?
Right. And they're going to process the crime scene, and they're going to determine that each parent was drained of their blood and cut up in the bathroom.
Okay, that's very meticulous work right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And at this house, though, again, it's a crime scene, but everything has been washed and cleaned up.
Makes sense.
The medical examiner, he's going to be quoted as saying, whoever did this apparently took their time and knew what they were doing.
Wow.
Now, investigators are going to find inside the keyhole of the door lock on Charles's bedroom at the residence. They're also going to find a tiny amount of blood in the bathroom that had not been cleaned up.
Okay.
They're going to search, like you said, they're going to search Charles's room.
You know where I'm already going with this, what I would love to do, just for a modern day analysis of this, is I doubt in '65 they had luminol, but I guarantee you could go to that house today and luminol it, and you could probably figure out at least where they were murdered,
Right.
where it happened. You could tell a lot probably from that today. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. So, you
know how my mind works. I
yes,
love this
yes.
stuff.
So inside Charles's room, they're going to find the handsaw that they determined was used to cut up his parents. Other than that, his room is spotless.
Yep.
They can't even find his fingerprints on everything, on anything.
Well, that tells you that, I mean, he had a nasty, bloody scene in there, and he meticulously cleaned it up.
He cleaned up everything, and again, there's no trace of the son.
Yeah.
Also inside the house, investigators are going to find the hammer that was used to kill Fred. And again, immediately the Houston Police Department, they put out this release that they want to locate Charles Rogers, and there is a nationwide manhunt for Charles.
Okay. Wow.
But
so let's get in Charles's mind for the moment, and let's say he's the suspect. Let's say he did this, and he meticulously cleans up this house, except for a couple little spots. He's pretty successful in getting rid of the blood. But then he leaves. If I'm understanding right, that when the police open the freezer, they think there's a lot of meat in here. So that tells me that this was wrapped up,
right,
in some form or fashion, maybe with butcher paper somehow. That's what I'm envisioning. And we're doing this, unfortunately, without the benefit of crime scene photos. But so he took the time to wrap up the other body parts, but left the heads down in the vegetable bin of the refrigerator unwrapped and obvious. So if he did this and he's in the wind, he had to know at some point someone's going to have to go in that house and
find this.
Bingo bongo. That's going to be pretty obvious,
Right.
So I'm wondering if that was maybe he left that as kind of a calling card that I'll have enough time to get away, and then when someone does find it, there won't be any doubt as to what happened to Fred and Edwina.
Yeah,
so,
you're right, because it would have been easier for him just to bury him in the backyard.
Yeah.
And no one would ever find it.
So anyway, just a little speculation, but please proceed. I love this.
So again, there's this manhunt for Charles, and there's never a verified sighting of him.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he just stepped off the face of the earth and took the truth with him.
That's fascinating.
So as an investigator, what we probably really need to do is dive into this case and determine who is Charles Rogers.
Oh, absolutely. You got to, that would be step one, man. Let's find out exactly who this guy is. Let's build a timeline around him.
So first up is people label him as a recluse, right? Mm-hmm. Again, only one of the neighbors was aware that he lived at that house with his parents.
Okay. So that means he's not obvious. He's not, he's not out in the yard. He's not coming and going a lot.
And again, he's 43 years old at the time of the murder.
Okay. Which, is unusual. Let's face it, a 43-year-old man, especially in that time, 1965, unmarried, living at home with mom and dad. That's not typical. For whatever the reason was, that's not typical.
And again, for neighbors not to even know that they had a son, to me that is just weird. Like, why they wouldn't have talked about their son or anything like that. It's just, to me, it's just so weird. But on June 25th, 1965, the Associated Press runs a story on Charles.
Okay.
And he's described as 5'7", weighing approximately 140 pounds, and has this balding, dark brown hair.
Okay.
And again, like I said before, that there's another neighbor who has lived there for 7 years, and she didn't even know that this couple had a son, let alone the son was living there. Some of the relatives now will say that, yes, Charles lived there, but Charles usually left early in the morning and he did not return to the house until after his parents had went to bed. These people had no idea where he went in the morning.
Yeah.
They don't know if he was going to work. Most of them weren't even sure that he even had a job.
Okay. Now I'm going to presume that Charles, if he had a car, because Houston itself is a town that there's not a lot of, there might have been buses, at that time. So, but that would entail that the neighbors would maybe see him walking to the bus station, the bus stop. So I'm going to assume he had a car.
Right. And I haven't seen that in the reporting, and I would actually probably disagree with you on that one by saying if he was pulling in and out with a car, neighbors are going to see that.
Well, that's true too. I mean, neighbors would see that.
They would say his car is missing or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
And again, it gets a little weird because there is another relative that says that Charles does all his own cooking on a hot plate in his bedroom.
Wow. Okay. So, man, he does. He keeps to himself.
And to the point that a relative further adds that Charles only communicated with his parents by sliding notes under his bedroom door.
Okay. So we got a serious, I said earlier, I'm being generous, that's not typical, but we've got someone with some serious problems going on.
He's
some
locked
serious
in his
antisocial.
Yeah, locked in his bedroom door, communicating by, you have to slide notes under his door.
Yeah, there's big time problems going on.
So also in his bedroom, when the police search it, they find that he has a commercial pilot's license and an honorable discharge from the Navy.
Okay.
They're further going to determine that Charles has a bachelor's degree in physics and that he spoke several languages.
Okay. So obviously a very smart guy.
Right. But again, hearing that doesn't really calculate or compute to this is the guy who's locked himself in a bedroom. That's 42 years old. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Being in the Navy. So this is where it's really weird. Now, relatives will say that after his time in the Navy, he worked for an oil company and that he traveled outside the United States with the oil company. Now, law enforcement reach out to the oil company, and they say he quit without a reason in 1957. So again,
he's quit this job 8 years earlier.
8 years prior to the murders,
Yeah.
he quit working. And, what he did during those 8 years really remains a mystery. You talked about wanting to look back at that house again. Just quickly here. In 1972, the city of Houston bulldozed the house down.
So much for the luminol testing.
Right.
Okay.
But really, since the murders, that house had remained vacant up until 1972.
Okay.
And then in 1976, a Houston judge declared that Charles Rogers was dead.
Okay. That makes sense as well.
Yeah. So, in fact, on June 26, 1984, the Associated Press runs a story. In there, it's reported that, hey, these murders happened 19 years ago. The Houston police are still wanting to interview Charles, but there have been no signs of Charles' whereabouts since the murder.
Mm-hmm.
And so, therefore, these two murders remain unsolved.
So I'm just, again, brainstorming as I would if this case landed on my desk. What do you think? What could Charles do? Did something suddenly snap? I think maybe back in those days they called it, having a nervous breakdown, and does that account for why he quits the job and then goes to the room and he's eating with a hot plate and passing notes under the door? Who knows exactly what a nervous breakdown is, but some kind of a mental problem, serious mental problem going on. And maybe something snapped. He disappears somewhere, can't take it. Does he commit suicide? But then you'd have a body.
Right.
But if there was no identification found on the body and he went someplace, maybe another country, because he had traveled outside the United States,
and he
spoke another country.
He spoke other languages.
Maybe had a different ID. He could have committed suicide in another country, or he could have just simply started a new identity, a new life.
Got new ID and,
Yeah.
and changed his name.
I'm sure at the time they also looked into the financial status of Fred and Edwina. I'm assuming we're talking about just probably a middle class family with not the kind of money I can move
Right.
away and live in luxury the rest of my life.
Right.
So but I wonder it's still you would need to look into that to see, did that give him, was there some kind of a nest egg that allowed him to start over?
Right. Now, remember early in this episode, I mentioned that we're going to take this, sharp left turn into conspiracy country.
I
Ready?
love it. I love it.
And so, Stuart, buckle up.
Okay.
Because we are banking.
I already love this case. Like I said, this is the kind of stuff I read about. I love these kind of cases. I love finding these things. I don't know what that says about me psychologically. Someone may say I've had a nervous breakdown.
Right.
But this stuff fascinates me. It always has. So I can't wait.
So we are going to bank hard left. And are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because in 1992, two well-known JFK assassination investigators, they write a book.
Oh, okay.
And in their book, they claim Charles Rogers was a CIA agent.
Okay.
And that they claim that he traveled to Mexico City posing as Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You've grabbed me now.
Yeah, exactly. I knew this was going to take you there.
I don't. First off, let's talk about Charles Rogers had an advanced degree. He speaks several languages. He's has a job that on the surface looks like he's working for an oil company. All that may be true, but I do know that is the kind of person that the CIA would look for to recruit to develop sources overseas. And so I'm not. A lot of people are instantly, you hear the word conspiracy, you hear JFK, they just write that off immediately. And I have to admit, at one time I was that same way. But having looked into it, there are certain elements of this JFK case that you cannot dismiss. Not to plug some of our other episodes, but we've delved into this, and there are some funky things that you just cannot dismiss out of hand.
Right.
And so I don't just dismiss it automatically because someone says, "Oh, this is a conspiracy." So you've grabbed my attention here, and I'm telling you that he fits what the CIA would want to, the type of person they would try to recruit.
Right. And again, when I mentioned how tall he was and what he weighed,
That's similar to Oswald.
Exactly.
Yes.
So these authors, these investigators, they further state that on November 22nd, 1963, in Dallas, Texas, minutes after the assassination of President Kennedy, they claim Charles Rogers was arrested on the grassy knoll.
Okay. All right.
Because we know moments after the assassination, the police officers search that area around the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
And they locate three people who are, I don't know if they're hiding, but they're located inside a train boxcar.
Yes.
Near the grassy knoll, and they're arrested by the Dallas Police Department.
Yeah, those there's a handful of pictures of those guys, and they've come to be known as the Three Tramps.
Right, and in fact, it's a famous photograph taken of the three men being escorted by police and taken to police headquarters to be interviewed. Many, and again, like you said, many people refer to them. It's the Three Tramp photo.
Now, I know that, as I said just a second ago, I've learned that I don't automatically dismiss something just because maybe there's a conspiracy element to it. But I will also acknowledge that there are certain conspiracy theories or conspiracy discussions that can go off the deep end really, really quickly. And so I know there has been a lot of speculation about who these three tramps might be. And so some of that will start getting really off the deep end quickly.
Exactly. And again, the JFK assassination happens about a year and a half prior to the murder of his parents. Now, over the years, Many people have given their opinions about these three guys by saying that they're not tramps. There's discussions about the clothing and the shoes that they're wearing in the photo,
Yep.
saying, tramps wouldn't wear this type of attire. To many people, it just doesn't make sense that these three people were inside a boxcar.
Right. So again, I'll clarify that my focus in the JFK assassination has been basically on the wounds of the president and what that implies, because that's where I try to follow the trail of evidence. But on the periphery, I know I'm somewhat familiar with some of these other topics. And the three tramps, that from that photo, one of the things that strikes me is they all appear to be clean-shaven, somewhat fresh haircuts. There's one in particular that he's wearing a blazer, a sport coat. He doesn't look like a tramp or hobo at all.
Right. So now in their book that's entitled The Man on the Grassy Knoll, these authors claim that Charles Rogers was one of two assassins who fired the fatal shots at President Kennedy.
Okay.
They further claim that Rogers was a CIA agent in Houston, Texas, and that when his mother found out about his involvement with the assassination, he brutally killed his parents in 1965 and disappeared.
Okay.
Now, this book goes further into names and connections, and it has several good reviews. So it might be worth picking up, taking a look at it.
No, I've already decided I'm going to delve into this.
And again, what is weird is that 30 years after the JFK assassination, the Dallas Police Department finally released the names of the three tramps from the photo. And one of them is not named Charles Rogers.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the identity of the three tramps has pretty much been settled. I think for the longest time, no one could find any evidence that they had been arrested. There was no arrest report, but I think in the subsequent years, they actually have been identified.
Right.
I don't know. I can't off the top of my head tell you their identities.
Yeah.
But one over the years, one of the speculations was that one of them was not Charles Rogers, but was actually Charles Harrelson, who is the father of Woody Harrelson. And Charles Harrelson actually was an assassin, because he actually killed a federal judge in San Antonio.
Right.
So, was that wild speculation that one of could have been Charles Harrelson? I'll let the listener decide that. But I do think that those three tramps' identities has actually been resolved.
Right. And again, to me, it's kind of weird that it takes the police department 30 years to release their names.
Well, that's another frustration I have with the whole Kennedy assassination. And, as we speak, I know that, there have been releases of the files, and the files are still not completely released. And what frustrates me is the stuff that's out there now that has newly been released. For the most of it, I'd say 95%, if not more, is stuff that should have never been classified, much less if it maybe had been classified at the day, certainly not 60 years later. This should have been released a long time ago.
Right. And again, after their names are released, there's a bunch of investigators. They track down and they actually talk to two of the people from the photograph. They both admitted that they were there, but they claim they were just riding the rails across the southern part of the United States.
Yeah.
The name of the third person in the photograph, he had since passed away, but investigators contacted his relatives, who verified, yes, that was their deceased relative in the photo. Again, Charles Rogers is not one of the names in the famous tramp photos.
Yes. Okay. It's an intriguing thing, but for the most part, I'm going to say that I'm going to agree that's not our suspect in this Houston killing.
Right. Now, in August of 2003, a husband and wife, they publish a book entitled The Icebox Murders, and this couple reinvestigate the case, and they do a deeper dive into who the parents were.
Okay.
And now in their book,
Yeah, I was going to say that on the flip side, yeah, we want to know all about Charles, but you also want to know about the parents. I mean, because that tells the story as well. That can give you leads and help you solve the thing.
in their book, they claim that Charles was not in the CIA, but after he committed the murders of his parents, he fled to Central America, where he later died.
Okay.
So again, this is
and again, that's not an unreasonable thing, knowing what we know about it.
Right. Yeah, he could easily get out of the country
Sure.
and speak
And he
another
had
language.
experience doing
Right.
it. Yeah.
So again, what's kind of a unique about this case is that it's an unsolved homicide investigation with just this side angle of a JFK conspiracy.
Well, let me go into some of the another possibility here. Again, I've made on other podcasts, what I think is I don't. A lot of people consider Lee Harvey Oswald to be a patsy that was completely innocent and totally set up, had nothing to do at all with the assassination. I don't buy that, although I believe there was a front shooter. So I believe there were 2 or more shooters involved in the assassination of the president. But I do not exonerate Oswald. There's some suspicious activity on his part that just cannot be dismissed, especially relating to the murder of J.D. Tippit. That's another podcast. If you guys are interested, check that one out. But one of the things about Oswald that was done in the investigation is heavily looked into his background, and there were a number of sightings of Oswald. In some cases where it couldn't possibly have been him, but they were very credible sightings. So if Charles Rogers, and unfortunately we're doing this without a lot of photographic background on this, but if Rogers, he's certainly the same general body size, if he did have some resemblance to him, that does go along with the theory of that these so-called Oswald imposters. And one of the areas where there definitely you can't dismiss the possibility of an Oswald imposter is in Mexico City, because there's some funky stuff that is way too detailed to get into here, but relates to Oswald in Mexico City. And if Charles Rogers had some experience down there, and certainly if he had been in part of the CIA, you cannot, as crazy maybe as that may sound, you cannot rule out that he still might have had some involvement in it. For me, it's definitely worth following up on.
Right, because I think if he was a government agent and he actually worked for the CIA, and again, he's a college graduate. He speaks several languages.
Yep.
He's had previous employment with foreign travel.
Yep.
He's a loner.
Yep.
I mean, what a great candidate for the CIA in the early 1960s.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I assume this is a cold case still with Houston PD, probably not being actively worked, because if your main suspect is, he was, what did you say, he was 43 in 1965?
Yeah, 42.
So that's going to put him at 100 years or older at this point. So the odds of him being alive are very, very slim. I'm sure that's not an active cold case at all. But if I had the resources of it and could do it, I would. I don't know what happened with the bodies, if any kind of tissue samples were kept of the bodies, but it would be interesting to query a DNA database today and see if maybe Charles Rogers might have had a secret life, had
other family
offspring,
members. Right?
And boy, that would be a really interesting hit to find.
Right, in that if he had changed his name and went ahead and lived his life,
right. But, you see, in those days it would have been way easier to just start a whole new life, but the DNA won't lie.
No,
so that would be a lead I would follow if I were the cold case guy in charge.
Right, and again, if he is a CIA agent, then I think maybe it makes sense that if his parents find out that he's involved in this assassination, that he kills them.
I'll tell you something else too that is another one of these strange anomalies about the Kennedy assassination that sounds outrageous, but you just it's just hard to dismiss. There were a number of witnesses and people involved, that when I say witnesses and involved in the assassination, I don't mean involved in killing him, but I mean that were either had witnessed some aspect of it, or had some connection to either Oswald or somebody in the assassination. There were a number of people that started dying in mysterious deaths over the years, like single car crashes, unexplained suicide, or out of unexpected suicides, falling off bridges. All kinds of weird deaths started happening, and I've saw in the research that at some point someone calculated the odds of this happening. People that all had this common thing of being a witness or some connection to the case, dying at certain ages in single car crashes and that kind of thing, and the odds are astronomical. Right. So is maybe Charles Rogers part of that? That if he did have some connection to it. Again, I just, there was a time in my life where I would have just thought, you're talking crazy, but I just don't dismiss that anymore out of hand. I just don't.
Right. But I would think this too, that if in fact he is a trained CIA agent and he kills his parents, I think he could have done a better job of eliminating their bodies without a trace.
Yes. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier.
And leave no evidence behind. Like, why put him in the refrigerator?
Right. Yeah, he had to, unless maybe he did have plans to come back and maybe he wasn't quite finished with his work there. And then, when he did come back, he found out that the police actually had been there, and then that's when he disappears. Or had he already disappeared when they found Fred and Edwina? I don't know. We don't. That's probably lost to history. But like I said, it is an interesting thing that if he had already fled, if he's already gone, that was an interesting way to leave them, because at some point someone's going in that house and they're going to open up that refrigerator.
He could have, like I said, he could have done a better job.
Yeah.
But then the other flip side of that is if we're going to say that he's just a loner and that he almost sounds like he's antisocial. Yeah. Well, then you have to say, wow, he sure knew how to disappear like a spy.
Absolutely.
Without a trace.
Exactly. This is really intriguing to me. This has some really intriguing elements to it that just is right in my wheelhouse. I love it.
Well, before we wrap this up, Stewart, do you have any last thoughts?
Man, I think I just said it. I mean, like I said, this is, I want to delve into this one further. This is a really cool case, and hats off to you for finding this one. I'm surprised I had never heard of this.
Well, this has been Back in Crime from the Texas Crime Travelers. If you like the story, leave us a review and share the episodes with your friends.
Yeah, please. Actually, we love the feedback. We also, hey, if you have some ideas about this, I would have thought that you couldn't hardly stump me on a case like this, but I got stumped on it, and I'm fascinated by it. So if you guys know of another one out there, and I'm sure they're out there, let us know of some unsolved case like this that has some really interesting elements, and we'd love to look into it.
Join us next time on Back in Crime, where we will explore another case.
This has been the Back in Crime podcast presented by Texas Crime Travelers Todd Hiles and Stewart Fillmore. We are the executive producers. Grace Hiles is the producer and director. Theme music composed by Eddie Bandas. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and our YouTube channel at Texas Crime Travelers.